They say that King Solomon built the greatest temple the world has ever known, but what they don't say is that he didn't actually build it alone. According to an ancient forbidden text known as the Testament of Solomon, the King Solomon, was given a ring, not just any ring, but a divine seal, a weapon of power, and a key that gave him command over 72 spirits. Spirits that he summoned, bound, and then forced to labor in the construction of a temple unlike anything Earth had ever seen. But this isn't merely a story about kings and demons, because hidden within the Testament of Solomon is something far more dangerous. This is a revelation that is so radical, it literally redefines what the temple truly is. Solomon's temple wasn't just a structure, but it was a blueprint, and it actually mirrors you. If you've never heard this side of the story, then please stay with me, because in the next few minutes you'll discover how this ancient text holds a forgotten key to self-mastery, to energy control, and to the sacred structure hidden inside of yourself. And if you'd like to see more videos on ancient and forbidden texts like this one, then please let me know in the comments. I do read everyone. Please also like and please subscribe to support my channel. And if you are looking for content that I can't always share here on YouTube, you'll find a link to my Patreon below. Most people think of Solomon as a wise king, as a figure from Sunday school stories and temple hymns. But hidden in the shadows of canonical history lies a very different King Solomon, one who didn't just rule a kingdom, but actually commanded an invisible world. The Testament of Solomon is not part of the Bible because it is a forbidden text, and it was written sometime between the 1st and 5th centuries AD. Though scholars today often refer to this period as the Common Era or CE. Scholars call it pseudepigrapha, meaning it was falsely attributed to Solomon. But those of us who've studied the occult know better, because within its pages is something far more than merely myth. It actually reads like a ritual manual, cloaked in parable. And in this text, Solomon receives a ring from the Archangel Michael, a ring inscribed with the seal of God. It actually gives him power to bind spirits, to command angels, and also to access realms far beyond human sight. Solomon uses this ring to summon 72 spirits, powerful intelligences often called demons, though that term oversimplifies what they are. Each one represents something completely different, a force of nature, a planetary current, or a fragment of consciousness. And Solomon doesn't just speak with them, he actually interrogates them. He learns their names, their functions, and their weaknesses, and then he assigns them specific roles in the construction of his sacred temple. Now, here's where this version of the story diverges from the one that you've probably heard before. Solomon isn't just a wise king, he actually becomes a magician. He becomes an architect of reality, bending unseen forces to his will. And this temple isn't just a monument to God, it's actually a multidimensional structure encoded with sacred geometry, cosmic law, and energetic design. And what if this was never meant for worship, but actually for control? Control of energy, control of space, and control of consciousness. See, most YouTube videos stop here. They summarize the spirits, they flash a few illustrations, and then move on. But what they all miss is that the reason the story survived centuries of suppression, because if you read the Testament of Solomon as a literal tale, it sounds like a fantasy, like a fairy tale. But if you read it as a cipher, it actually becomes a guide, not just to building a temple of stone, but to building the temple within yourself. When people first hear that Solomon controlled 72 demons, the imagination runs wild with horns and fire and twisted creatures obeying a king. But that's merely the surface layer. And if you stay there, you actually miss the real treasure. Because in esoteric systems, from Hermeticism to Kabbalah to inner alchemy, spirits are rarely literal monsters. What they are archetypes. Hence, each spirit that Solomon commands represents a specific fragment of the human experience, not actually an external entity at all, but an internal force, a distortion of will and a magnetic pull, perhaps a shadow of the psyche. Some traditions even say that these spirits are aspects of the soul that has been splintered and now merely seek reintegration. Take, for example, the spirit known as Asmodeus. Traditionally, Asmodeus governs lust, chaos, and destructive pleasure. But deeper systems of occultism and magic and psychology say that Asmodeus isn't evil at all. He's simply unmastered desire. He's the raw creative force with no direction, the fire of sexuality or artistry untamed by your higher consciousness. Or Belial, often called the spirit of lawlessness. In the Testament, Solomon struggles to bind him specifically because Belial represents the ego's refusal to submit to higher order. It represents the part of you that actually wants power, but power without any purpose, hence influence without integrity. Hence, when Solomon questions each spirit, he's not actually gathering trivia. He's interrogating the self. He's asking vital questions such as, what does this force actually do? What influence does it have over the world and then over me? See, this is where the real brilliance of the Testament of Solomon emerges. Solomon doesn't destroy the spirits. He doesn't exile them, but he assigns them a role in the sacred construction of the temple. He turns the energies that once seduced, derailed, or fragmented him into the builders of the temple. So think about that for a bit. This isn't a story of spiritual warfare, but it is a story of spiritual alchemy, of sacred alchemy. The dark doesn't get banished, but it gets transformed. It is given structure. And in doing so, Solomon becomes more than merely a king. He becomes a mirror of the divine. He becomes one who can take even the fallen energies and then turn them, transmute them into sacred architecture. Now that we've seen how the 72 spirits represent inner forces, such as archetypes, shadows, and fragmented aspects of consciousness, it's time to look at the other side of the story, which is the temple. Solomon's temple wasn't merely a physical structure made out of stone. Most people assume that it was built for worship and that it was a monument to God. But what if that assumption is completely incomplete? What if this temple was actually a coded model designed not for external praise and worship, but rather for internal alignment? What if this was a divine machine built to channel energy, to amplify consciousness, and to unlock human potential? In mystical traditions like Kabbalah, Hermeticism, and Freemasonry, Solomon's temple is seen as a symbol for the human energy body. Its architecture actually reflects the structure of the soul, the layers of consciousness that move from matter to spirit. The temple has three major sections. The outer court, the first section, where the people entered. Then the inner sanctuary, where offerings were made. And finally, the Holy of Holies, which was the most sacred space where divine presence was believed to dwell. Each of these aligns to different energy centers in the body. For example, the outer court of the temple actually corresponds to the lower chakras, the lower energy centers, which represents your base instincts, your physical needs, and survival patterns. The inner sanctuary reflects the heart space, where emotion, devotion, and intention live. And the Holy of Holies mirrors the third eye, the crown chakra, and basically your higher centers, your connection to spirit, to intuition, and to divine awareness. In Kabbalah, the same layout is reflected in the Tree of Life, from Malkut, which is at the base of the tree, to Keter, which is at the crown. The path through the temple actually mirrors the path of spiritual ascent, and even the measurements of the temple were actually based on sacred geometry, ratios and dimensions believed to align with the laws of the cosmos. The goal was not simply to honor a deity, to praise and to worship, but it was to build a structure that resonated both with the heavens above and with the energy systems within you. So when we actually say that the temple is a reflection of the body, we mean this literally and symbolically because it is a model for alignment of mind, body, and spirit, brought into harmony through intention, through structure, and through internal order. Solomon didn't just build a temple, he actually organized his inner world. He gave purpose to each and every single force within him. He created sacred order where there was once energetic chaos. And that is why the story matters, because it is not about forgotten buildings in ancient Jerusalem, but it is about a blueprint that you can actually apply to yourself. And you can do that right now, because like Solomon, we all begin in disorder with conflicting desires, fears, instincts, and imbalances. But through conscious ritual, through awareness, and through will, those forces can be refined and redirected. And when that happens, when we do those things, we become the temple, a living vessel where divine energy can flow clearly, freely, and with actual purpose. In the Testament of Solomon, the king is given a ring by the Archangel Michael, but this ring isn't just a magical object, it's a symbol of spiritual authority. This ring is engraved with the seal of God. And when King Solomon wears this ring, he actually gains the power to command the spirits to uncover their purpose and to assign them to specific roles. In esoteric terms, the ring represents conscious willpower, which is your ability to direct energy rather than to be directed by it. And if this ring symbolizes personal sovereignty, then who really benefits from building a temple through commanded forces? What if King Solomon wasn't just channeling divine will, but what if he was actually working with a technology of consciousness far more advanced than we've been taught? Let's take a practical example from this text. One of the first spirits that King Solomon encounters is Orneus. This is a being who actually drains energy from young men at night and then causes confusion, fatigue, and finally weakness. If this sounds familiar, in modern terms, this could represent an energetic parasite, a draining pattern like compulsive urges, like scattered focus, or perhaps even spiritual burnout. But instead of destroying Orneus, Solomon questions him. He actually asks him, "Who are you? What power do you hold? And how can you be made useful in building the temple?" Eventually, Orneus is bound and finally redirected. His energy is no longer chaotic, but it's reassigned to serve a higher purpose. See, this is the key to the entire system. These rituals weren't about blind dominance, but they were about awareness, and they definitely were about integration. King Solomon doesn't repress any form of energy. He works with it. He observes energy and finally understands it and then gives it structure. And this actually mirrors real spiritual practice. For example, if you often feel scattered, fatigued, or overrun by desire, that could be your or Nia's, a reoccurring pattern asking to be acknowledged. Instead of fighting this, you bring it into your awareness, you track its root, you redirect it through focused breath work, through sacred intention or creative ritual, into something that can be useful and empowering. Another example can be Asmodeus, a spirit linked to lust and destruction. He tells Solomon that he causes chaos in relationships and blinds people with desire. Solomon doesn't banish Asmodeus, he simply binds him to serve. Even the most overwhelming urges, when understood properly, can be channeled towards sacred creation. This is ultimately what the Testament is really teaching. It's not just a story about spirits, but it's a system of energetic command. You name the force that you are facing, and in naming this force, you begin to understand its influence. Then you can assign it a new role. In that sense, the ring isn't just Solomon's tool, but it's a metaphor for your daily discipline. The part of you that pauses, the part of you that observes and redirects energy with intentions. And all of these rituals aren't just ancient ceremonies, but they are your inner workings, your meditation, your prayer, and your focused breath. Even things such as journaling. See, when Solomon binds these spirits and then puts them to work, he's showing us that no part of us is inherently evil or unworthy, only unconscious or merely unaligned. And true mastery fundamentally doesn't come from suppression, but it comes from conscious leadership of your own inner world, your inner planes. So why should a book like the Testament of Solomon matter today? Because beneath all the myth and all the symbolism, it's not just a story about demons and power, but it's a guide to self-mastery. Solomon's ability to command spirits isn't about control just for the sake of control, but it is about learning to recognize, to confront, and to work with the different energies moving through your life. And more than just that, it's about integrating the shadow. In modern terms, the 72 spirits can be seen as emotional patterns like fear, anger, and jealousy or lust, or psychological habits like procrastination, self-doubt, or control issues, or energetic imbalances, the things that drain your motivation, that scatter your focus, or keep you in cycles of confusion. In other words, the spirits are archetypes. They live within us. And just like in the Testament, they often go unchecked when we are unconscious of them, when we repress or ignore them. But Solomon shows us another path. He doesn't suppress these forces. He merely names them. He actually listens to them, and he then reassigns them with a purpose. This is the essence of shadow work, not banishing what is uncomfortable, but actually bringing it into your awareness and then reassigning it to alignment. Let's say that you are struggling with anxiety. It consumes your thoughts and it scatters your energy and fundamentally drains you. But instead of running from it or fighting this anxiety, you pause, you observe it, and you ask yourself, what is this force actually trying to protect me from? What does it want? You bring it into your consciousness. You redirect the same energy into planning, into ritual, or into creative action. That is the ritual and that is the ring. You're taking an unconscious archetype and then turning it into a conscious ally. The same applies to things such as desire, to feelings of anger, even to grief and to fear of failure. Every one of these spirits become fuel for building your own temple if you are willing to meet it honestly and guide it with intention. And this is the real message of the Testament of Solomon. It's not about a king that once built a stone temple using demons, but it is that you are the builder. The message is that you have the same tools. You have your will, you have awareness, and you have ritual, and that you can bring structure to your chaos and alignment to your fragmentation and fundamentally become the living temple that you were always meant to be. The Testament of King Solomon is just one of many ancient texts that hold forgotten keys, not just forgotten keys of magic or of myth, but to understanding ourselves on a deeper level. Because when we actually learn to work with these forces, instead of fearing them, and definitely instead of suppressing them, we stop seeing ourselves as broken and we start recognizing ourselves as temples in the making. If this video spoke to you and if you'd like more like it, then please let me know in the comments. Would you like to explore other ancient and forbidden texts, perhaps grimoires, perhaps mystical writings and hidden rituals that were lost? And if you'd like to support this kind of work, or perhaps explore content that I can't always share here, you can always find me on Patreon. I'll drop the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.